Well, guys, first of all, welcome to Number One Comic Books. My name is Tom, and I did it again. I literally just recorded. When these videos come out, I think they're generally maybe 10 minutes long or in that neighborhood. And the recording typically takes me about 20 to 30 minutes. I just recorded for about 25 minutes on this book to look down and realize that I didn't have the record button pressed. Sometimes I don't know what I'm thinking. However, with that boneheaded move out of the way, we're recording now, and the focus of this video is going to be A Haunted Girl. It just came out a week or two ago. I've just read it. I have my opinions. Let's see what kind of ratings we give this book and our 6 criteria. All right, so I am a little bit disappointed. I thought the first take was really good, and I missed it all, so let's do it again here. And we start, as always, with the cover. We have 4 variants for this book. I'm not a big variant fan, as I've mentioned before. I'll show you the 4 variants on the screen. I think the one that I picked up, which is this copy, is the best cover in my opinion. So I am happy that my comic book store had this copy, the last copy that they had. I really like the dark feel. It does have a Halloween season horror feel to it, you know, with the dark background. And then, of course, that glowing orb really stands out and catches your attention. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the cover. This cover was done by Joe Quesada and Richard Isanov. I hope I'm saying that right, or Isanov. And I think it's a really cool cover. I mean, as I mentioned, it drew my eye to pick it up in the comic book store, and that's what this category is all about. Is it going to draw you in? Now, even though it did draw me in to pick it up and look at it, I didn't purchase it necessarily for the cover. I purchased it more of what I've been hearing on other channels, and it's been getting some good reviews. So that was more of the deciding factor to give it a shot, more than the cover. But the cover's still good, and I'm going to give that a 6 out of 10. All right, next criteria is characters. There's not a whole lot of depth here. We have Cleo, and then her father, Mr. Newman. I don't know his first name. He just goes by Mr. Newman. You've got some folks, some staff in the hospital. You've got some kids in the high school. You've got a few ghosts that pop up. But other than that, I mean, it's really heavily focused on Cleo, which Cleo is a cool character. There's some depth and some substance certainly there. Mr. Newman, we don't know a whole lot about him, but there's not much in the way of any other supporting characters, at least that make a huge impact in book 1 that might evolve in the next 3 books, as this is a 4-part miniseries. So with the characters, certainly I would have scored this lower if it wasn't for Cleo, but Cleo raises this up to a 6 out of 10. Okay, panel art. The panels in this book were done by Marco Lorenzana, and I thought they were very good. He has a brilliant way of using those panels to tell a story. We had, at least to my memory here, one page, if not numerous pages, where there was no text at all. No speech bubbles, no little blocks of text kind of explaining what's going on. You just looked at it, and visually the story was told. You didn't need anything else. And that is always a big plus. I mean, that is fantastic when you can do that. But as I always say with the modern comics, I like the artwork of the old days. To me, some of this can be a little cartoony looking. And I know it's probably just somebody of my age, because the stuff that I like for instance, Steve Ditko and that old Spider-Man artwork, you'd look at that and you'd compare it to this and you'd laugh in my face that that's not more cartoony than this. And I can't say that I wouldn't disagree with you, certainly, but it's just more my preference. So that's probably the best way to put it. I need to come up with some other way of relaying that, but my preference is that old school stuff versus the new school for the most part. But I thought the panels, regardless, I thought Marco did a great job. I thought it captured the feel of the story very well, and I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Okay, next up we have readability, and as I mentioned, readability, from a panel perspective, if you're just reading the panels and kind of the emotions of the story, it was fantastic. When they did incorporate the speech bubbles, and we had a couple little blocks of translation, of course we had some thought bubbles, like in high school, what the kids were thinking of our main character Cleo when she returned to high school from her time in the hospital, but it was never overdone. Conversations were easy to follow. They were laid out well. I don't really have a whole lot else to say about this, other than it's going to get my highest score on this book. Readability is a 9 out of 10. Okay, and next up is story, and what we always do for story, or you didn't know, if this is the first video of mine you've watched, I use Bing, ChatGPT. I put in a prompt to give me a 6 to 8 sentence synopsis of the book. I'm going to read it in its entirety. This is what we got. A Haunted Girl is a 4-issue miniseries published by Image Comics Syzygy. I think that's pronounced Syzygy. The comic book is co-written by Ethan Sachs and Naomi Sachs, with art by Marco Lorenzana. The story follows Cleo, a 16-year-old adopted Japanese-American girl who is battling depression and anxiety. After being discharged from the hospital, she tries to reintegrate into her old life, but finds herself encountering an increasingly terrifying succession of ghosts. The comic book channels terrors, both otherworldly, as well as the real-life terror that comes with struggles of anxiety and depression. The first issue of A Haunted Girl was released on October 11, 2023, and is available for purchase at $4.99, which I did. So, for the story, it's an interesting story, and I like the progression, that you've got your backstory, and it kind of flowed into the present, and they set you up for the next book. Really, my main point of contention with the story was I'm not exactly certain on the Cleo character in her past. What do I mean by that? Okay, well, the book opens up with a kid playing outside in Japan, and he sees what I'm going to just say is a demon, a ghost, and then followed by this floating orb that you see on the cover of the book. The child is compelled to run into the forest, where the child gets the orb, and then the demon or the ghost is in there with the child, and that's it. We cut to present day, which is 15 years later. So, I'm assuming because Cleo was adopted from Japan, that the child in the opening sequence is Cleo. There's also a part in the book where Mr. Newman, her father, calls Japan after things really start getting bad with Cleo and what she's dealing with, and the conversation with the lady in Japan is that, oh, it's happening, I told you this would happen, blah, blah, blah. Now, if my thought is correct that Cleo is the child from Japan, which would make sense because that's where Mr. Newman adopted her from, then you're saying 15 years later, Cleo's in the hospital celebrating her 16th birthday. So in those opening panels, she was 1. That child in the opening panels is a lot older than 1 year old. I mean, that child's outside playing by themselves, running around in the forest. I mean, you're talking, just from what I can tell from the images, my guess would be somewhere along, on the low end, I'll say 4, like a 4 to 6, 7-year-old child. So if it is Chloe, that part of it was a little confusing to me. And if it's not Chloe, then I'm still a little confused. However, with that out of the way, the rest of the story made up for it enough. So if it wasn't for that little fact, I would have this a little bit higher, but it still gets a very good score of a 7 out of 10. All right, and finally, something that is very close to my heart, and that is the hook. I love a good comic book hook. I like to get to that last panel, that last page, and just have that cliffhanger. And, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I need number 2 to be out now, or whatever the next book is, because I've got to read it and I've got to see what happens. So that's how we judge the hook. In this case, at the very end, Chloe is, she ran away from home. You get the sense she goes to like the edge of a cliff, I believe. Is she thinking of jumping off the cliff because she's tired of dealing with these ghosts and the other things she's battling with? She does not. Suddenly, a ghost comes up out of the ground. I'll just leave it at that. Chloe is frightened, I said Chloe. If I've said Chloe any other time in this video, please forgive me. Cleo runs away, hurts her knee, falls to the ground, and then that orb that we've talked about a few times here pops up, and she's kind of enamored by the orb, and that's where it ends. It's Cleo and the orb. So, it wasn't like that new ghost was going to attack her or said something that was going to really draw you to, oh my gosh, what happens next? And I'm, a big, again, old school comic book fan where maybe that final panel is, a new character comes out of nowhere, or there's some life and death battle that's getting ready to start up, and you've got to see how, what happens. This really didn't have that to me. The orb, it was a nice tie-in from the beginning, although again, a little confusing for me. But without rambling any further, I gave Hook a 5 out of 10. Okay, and we've come to the breakdown portion of the show. My recording software is still going, so that is good news this time around. This is where I noticed in the previous attempt to record this that the software wasn't recording. So here we go. For A Haunted Girl number 1, we gave the cover a 6, characters a 6, artwork got an 8, readability got a 9, and our hook got a 5. We use a weighted scoring system. It is a proprietary formula, so I don't share that. A Haunted Girl scores a 6.29 out of 10. And as I mentioned before, really anything a 6 and above I think is considered a good book. So the pressing question, the ending of every video in this series is, am I going to pick up number 2, or number 1 was okay, but I'm really not interested in moving on to number 2. I will admit, this was a close call. And some of it is to the volume of comic books that you buy and read. There's only so many that I can continue to buy before my wife would want to kill me. I'm spending hundreds of dollars a week on comic books. So you've got to be somewhat selective. So I really do need something to draw me to continue on in a series. This is a good book. The artwork was well done. Readability was great. I love the fact that it is a 4-book miniseries. That draws me because I know that I'm not on the hook for, 40, 50 books. It's going to be done in 4. So, a fairly slim margin, but my answer to this question is yes. I'm looking forward to number 2. I'll put number 2 on the pull list. I'm not sure when it comes out, but I definitely want to see what happens here with Cleo and the orb and these ghosts. And so there's enough intrigue in this book that's going to pull me to the next one. So there you have it. I would be interested, certainly, in your take on, not necessarily you don't have to follow the categories, but just your overall take on the book, and if you are going to purchase number 2 as well. Or, if you have not purchased this book after watching this video, may you go out and purchase it now. Let me know that as well. So there you have it. We're going to call an end to this video. As always, thank you guys so much for spending your time to watch anything that I put out here on YouTube. It really means a lot, and I truly hope to see you next time.